All right, Joe Biden had talks with Chinese President Xi over the weekend. This was a big deal, although not much came from this whatsoever. We did have the two agreeing to have arms talks, which is a good thing, although there's no sign that this is actually going to come of anything. And China has been pretty clear in the past that unless the U.S. is talking about, making their arsenal smaller, China's not going to do the same because China's arsenal is like 5% of what the U.S. Nuclear weapons arsenal is, and the U.S. has far more nuclear just kind of technology. And also we're spending $2 billion currently to wrap up our nuclear technology. And so like I said, I don't see anything coming out of these talks. The meeting between Biden and Xi apparently was 3 hours long, and so hopefully at least there was a good amount of understanding of each other's positions put forward. Another small but somewhat important development from the talks was that the U.S. and China agreed to ease restrictions on each other's journalists. This was going to allow Chinese journalists to get a full year visa to come to the United States rather than the current 90-day visa that they're currently limited to. And China will allow reporters from the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times back into China. So while Biden and Xi, had these talks, which was absolutely great, could be diplomacy moving in the right direction, the U.S. quickly followed that up by signaling more support for Taiwan, and this is going to be something that's going to deteriorate the U.S. and Chinese relationship. The U.S. had higher level than usual talks with Taiwan. This, doesn't mean that Joe Biden is meeting with the Taiwanese president, but the U.S. and Taiwan really aren't supposed to have deep foreign relations. And so the Taiwanese deputy defense minister, deputy foreign minister, and national security deputy was going to meet with U.S. State Department as secretaries. These are relatively important meetings. Eli Ratner is going to meet involved here, and he's a part of the Pentagon's special China advisory. And so, these kind of means are very important, and China is going to be unhappy and see it as the U.S. not being really interested in any of the diplomacy it talked about at the Biden-Xi summit. The U.S. also began anti submarine drills with Japan in the South China Sea following the talks, another signal to China that the U.S. really isn't interested in any diplomacy. And we have Taiwan announcing their first advanced F 16 squadron is being deployed. They have a lot of old F 16 that they're upgrading, and then they're buying some new ones. These F-16Vs that Taiwan is now deploying are some of the most advanced warfighters in the world. Short of, I think, like the F-22, it's one of the best planes that the U.S. puts out there. And so China is going to be concerned and see this as a threat. And of course, know that American military industrial complex is making a lot of money, and this is buying Taiwan an awful lot of goodwill in the United States that I'm sure they will use to ramp up anti-China propaganda. There is a congressional advisory board that meets on China, and members of this board include people from Heritage and the Hudson Institute. And so you could expect they're going to put out a hawkish report, and they absolutely did. This particular report that they put out called for Washington to take a tougher stance on Taiwan, not meeting, hey, Taiwan, we have this one China policy, and so we have to be careful. They're calling for the United States to appropriate more funds for Taiwan to buy U.S. made weapons and things like that. Of course, think tanks funded by the military industrial complex advocating for policies that benefit the military industrial complex. We have Australia saying that it would be inconceivable that they wouldn't join a fence of Taiwan with the United States. Now, whether the U.S. would actually defend Taiwan if China invaded is, another story. But this is a signal from Australia, I think, that they want to be more involved in the U.S. actions countering China, like the AUKUS Treaty, and see an important place in the, U.S. empire sphere. We have Secretary of State Antony Blinken meeting with the Chinese delegation and again committing the United States to defend the Senkaku Islands that are also claimed by China and Taiwan. The U.S. is willing to defend these for China with military force. It's a very disturbing claim, but the U.S. has made it through several administrations. Now, the U.S., while meeting with Japan, also was going to have a joint press conference with Japan and South Korea. However, a South Korean and Japanese territorial dispute over shared islands has caused both of those delegations to actually miss the press conference, and the U.S. was just left standing there by itself without its allies. And maybe there's a very important visual to think about there, where you have U.S. allies who will say we'll defend your territories, but then they can't even attend a press conference with us over their own disputes.